Hi there, my name is Joseph Hewitt, also known as Penguin Ajashi, and this is the Mr. Penguin Comic Show. Since this is the first episode, I thought I should introduce myself. I'm originally from Newfoundland in Canada, but have been living here in South Korea since 1998, so about 20 years. I started making comics during university in the early 90s with the mini-comic The Adventures of Guelph Erroneous Gnome. Unfortunately, only about 5 copies of this book exist because it took about 7 hours to run one off on a 1990s era inkjet printer. Later on, I did more mini-comics, Ataraxia Theater, 3 Ages of Damien Chan. After graduating university, though, I realized that these mini-comics were not going to sustain me in the elaborate cup noodle lifestyle I had grown accustomed to. So a friend of mine, who's Korean-Canadian, suggested that I come to Korea for a few years, teach English here, pay off my student loans, then return to Canada and take up cartooning again. Well, I'm happy to say I got most parts of this plan right. I did come to Korea, I paid off my student loans, and promptly forgot about ever coming back. Instead, I've remained here, where I publish books under the imprint Polar Bear Comics.
It's the Penguin Rangers. You have the red penguin, the pink penguin, the green penguin, the yellow penguin, the blue penguin. They come together to make a giant penguin.
You can order these books online and have them delivered to anywhere in the world if you're into that sort of thing. I'd like to talk for a little bit about comics in Korea, because comics over here are huge. Everybody reads comics. If you're riding on a train or a bus, it's quite easy to see people reading comic books, browsing webtoons on their phone, decked out in character merchandise. Bookstores are loaded with educational comics covering everything from world travel to where poop comes from. The comics economy is huge. There are about 10,000 people employed in comics in Korea, and that does not count the people employed in all of the spin-off industries, such as character marketing, animation, or the TV shows and movies that are based on comics. The Korean comics culture is inclusive. Everybody can read comics, from the other kids at my son's elementary school to my mother-in-law. In North America, we tend to think about comics as appealing to a specific, rather narrow demographic, the white, male, nerdy comics fan. In Korea, this is not true. People see comics as appealing to anybody. This becomes obvious when you look at the comics section in any bookstore. Unlike North America, where the comics section tends to be dominated by superheroes and gritty adventure stories, over here you can find just about anything. You can find adventure stories, romance stories, pet stories, cooking stories, stories about romancing your pets, stories about cooking adventures. I'm not going to judge. Whatever you want, that's good. A few years ago, I was invited to a Transformers fan convention. When I got there, I noticed that I was the only man tabling. One of the organizers came up to me later and jokingly asked if I had any suggestions for how to get more men interested in Transformers. I told her, I don't know, I'm doing my part. Korea has a ton of comics events. The big one is Comic World. This event is held 14 times a year in Seoul, Busan, and Daegu, each time drawing hundreds of artists and thousands of fans. Comic World is primarily a fandom convention. It has cosplay and a lot of fan art, though you will find some people who attend who do original works, such as myself, available online. After that, we get some slightly smaller conventions, such as Diku, the Daejeon Intermedia Comics Union, and Cake Squared. These conventions tend to go for a slightly different crowd than the Comic World people, because, Cake Squared focuses more on original works, and Diku has a lot of extra events, such as the Animated Film Festival, and panel discussions, and sometimes the Webtoon Artist Rock Band concert, which was great. After that, we get the really tiny conventions, such as Til Alar 1, AliCon, and Sci-Fi Only. These cons tend to either target a specific city or a narrow fandom, such as Transformers or Yuri on Ice, and there are a ton of them. If you visit one of the larger cons, usually you can pick up a lot of flyers announcing all of the smaller conventions that are going to be happening that month. Korea also has a couple of corporate-type conventions, such as the Seoul International Cartoon and Animation Festival and the Bucheon International Comics Festival. These tend to be more like trade shows than regular comics conventions. Earlier this year, American company ReedPop jumped into the fray with the first Comic-Con Seoul. The great thing about having all of these conventions in Korea is that because of Korea's great public transportation system, you can do all of them. It's no problem to go anywhere in the country just for a weekend, or even for the day. So I try to attend as many of these events as I can. Well, that's it for this time. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again.